Sharon, San Ramon, you're next up on KGL.
Good morning.
Good morning. What's on your mind, Sharon?
I would just like to know, do you have an answer for all the uproar now about the Obama administration and the taxes, you know, the Tea Party people and all the animosity about the deficit and losing our freedom, and where were they? I'm trying to figure out why the animosity now when the Obama administration is starting to dig us out of the hole that Bush put this country in.
Well, that's more of a statement than a question. I don't necessarily. Well, you said the hole that the Bush put us in.
Right.
Well, were you aware of the fact up until 2008 that we had low unemployment? We had a burgeoning economy. Stock market was high. I mean, hey, you know,
who's responsible for where we were before the Obama administration came into power?
Who's responsible for where we were?
Our economy.
Well, do you recall in 2008?
For the last 8 years, where do you think it started?
Oh, for the last 8 years? Well, hey, let me remind you, Sharon. You better go back and look at a little data. And I'm not down on the Obama administration any more than you're down on the Bush administration. But let me go back and remind you that we had a period of 6 years of steady growth, low unemployment, and starting about 2007, 2008.
And what about the deficit?
What about the deficit?
Mm-hmm.
That was about a quarter of what you have now under the Obama administration.
No, I'm talking about the deficit.
No, I'm talking. You want to talk about deficit? You asked what was the number. The number was about 1/4 of what you have now.
Okay, and what he
Well, not
had
just a minute. I mean, why skip from one thing we move over to another one, Sharon? Now,
I asked you what he had to do in order to bring us back was add more to the deficit in order to get it down. Isn't that right?
No, not necessarily. But what do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean? In order to bring us down, you go more and more in debt.
The deficit down. He had to, in order to bring us out of a recession, which is where we were headed. He had to increase it a certain amount in order to keep us from getting into a recession.
Well, $800 billion was spent, and some people are still wondering where $600 billion of that went.
But
do you know how many people? Do you know how many people are still out of work?
But how many jobs have been increased since 19? How many jobs have we had?
How many jobs have been increased? Boy, I'll tell you how many jobs have been increased.
3 years.
We still have over 10% unemployment.
When was the last time we've had job increases?
We haven't had any job increases. All you've had is a slowdown in the last 2 years.
And we've had an economy that's coming back from where Bush put us. And I'm trying to figure out where's all the animosity from the Tea Party.
Well, you know, I'm trying to figure out where was all the animosity towards Bush.
He was doing
do you recall the animosity? Do you recall the animosity towards Bush? Come on now.
When he was getting us into 2 unpaid wars, where were the people talking?
Wait a minute. Where in the hell do you think we are now, Sharon? You know, is there any difference between the Obama policy in Afghanistan and Bush in Iraq? Tell me the difference, Sharon.
Where were the protests when he was making all these?
You skipped. Hey, you're a good Sharon. You're a good political pundit because you keep moving rapidly to a different subject when you're challenged on the previous one. But I want you to tell me before we spend any more airtime. You're going to answer one question. Tell me the difference between the Obama policy in Afghanistan and the Bush policy in Iraq. Who are we fighting?
Al-Qaeda.
And what's the difference between the two policies and what they're actually doing right now?
Well, there was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq. That should have never happened.
Where in the world? Hey, where in the world have you been? Where in the world have you been when the head of Al-Qaeda in Iraq declared that was the battlefront against the West? Don't you remember the leadership and the names? Don't you remember who pulled off most of the acts of terrorism in Iraq, Sharon?
Where did it come from? Where
Sharon, you're not answering a question, and I tell you, your political propaganda here isn't working very well. You're skipping from one subject to the next. Look, if you want to be fair, I don't see a hell of a lot of difference between the two. If you want my opinion, you ask my opinion, I'm going to give it to you. I don't see a hell of a lot of difference between the two, and I happen to agree that they need to be in Afghanistan, but to listen to hypocrites say this is so wonderful and it was so bad then, hey, you look awful, awful foolish, Sharon. I'm sorry. Okay, KGO time now, 12:18.